Imagine we're in work. I'm your manager and you've just done a piece of work. You've given it to me and I look at it and I say, do you know what? This is a good piece of work. But what's going through your head right now? For most people, they start to become a bit defensive. You start to feel a bit frustrated. You're thinking, oh, here we go again. What have I done wrong this time? But I said, this is a really good piece of work. But unfortunately, you've ignored that and you've focused in on one single word. The word is but. A few years ago, I read a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini, and what he talked around in one of the chapters was something called a click and run method. It's when a certain input happens and it creates an almost automatic response. And he gives some examples from nature that we find. So one of them is that when robins, the birds, see a piece of material that's the same colour as their redbreast, they will go and attack it because it's territorial. Even if it's not an actual other male robin, they still go and do it anyway. It's a click and run method. They see the colour and they act automatically to go and defend their territory, move the other male robin away. Now, interestingly, humans also have these click and run methods, but they're around language often. So one of them that he talks around in the book is the word because. So he gives an example of an experiment where people are waiting in a library, so this was years ago now, to use a photocopier, I think it was. And he waited for a queue to form and then he would send in an actor. And the actor would ask different things to see whether he could jump the queue. So in the first run of the experiment, the actor would walk in and ask to use the photocopier ahead of other people, but wouldn't give a reason. And they had quite low uptake. People were waiting in line, why would I let you in front of me? In the second run, they asked the actor to go in and give a valid reason. Could I use the photocopier because I need to take my daughter to school and we're running late? So notice the word because was in there and then they gave a valid reason. And the uptake of the queue jumped massively. People are fair, people are reasonable. That's a reasonable reason that someone needs to jump ahead of me. Sure, you can jump in. Now this is the interesting part. In the third run, they asked the actor to go in and say the word because, but then give a really redundant reason. So for example, can I use the photocopier because I need to photocopy some things? Well, obviously, that's what we're all here to do. But did it increase the amount of people that said yes? Here's the weird thing. It absolutely did. To the same amount as if it was a really valid reason. So what does that tell us? There are certain words that act like click and run methods. In this case, it was because, and then we give a reason. The listener doesn't really process the reason. They just heard the word because, so it must be a good reason. And the word but has a very similar impact on people. If you pass your work to me, this is a great piece of work, but I initiate that click and run method. And the click and run method is to get defensive. So what the word but does is it minimizes the previous statement, this is a good piece of work, and it amplifies the following statement. And 9 times out of 10, people say something positive, this is a great piece of work, but something negative. There are a lot of mistakes in here. So again, this is a great piece of work, but there are a lot of mistakes in here. That's the part that people focus on, the qualifying statement after the but. And as I mentioned earlier, then people get defensive, they get frustrated, they start arguing back, they shut down in the conversation, they walk off, they don't reply to following emails, and so on and so forth. So how do we avoid that happening? There's 2 simple methods to do this. Now, when I say simple, it's not always easy to do because the word but is so habitual for most people. But the 2 methods are, number 1, separate your negative and positive statement with a full stop. So it sounds like this. This is a great piece of work. We need to talk around some of the mistakes. So it sounds like 2 completely separate statements. The second method, swap the positive and negative around. So instead of this is a great piece of work, but there are some mistakes, try there are some mistakes, but this is a great piece of work. The emphasis is then on the positive statement. So the next time you're providing feedback to someone in work, be really mindful of your use of but. Again, either separate them into 2 completely separate statements or put the negative before the but and the positive afterwards so that the emphasis is on that. Hope this helps.